So yeah, I've had issues with therapists over the years, and um, from the very beginning, my very first therapist asked me why I came in for therapy, and I told him because I was feeling invisible. And I keep going back to that because I feel like I'm still telling therapists this, and it's like depression and anxiety and PTSD are addressed, but not this feeling invisible thing. And, I've gone through this carousel of medications that have made that feeling worse. And that's because they're not taking that into account when they prescribe those things, because they obviously don't think it's that big of a deal. And it's the most persistent of all of my symptoms. And when a therapist is not there for an appointment, there have been times when they've canceled ahead of time, and there have been times when I go in there and the staff pretends that the therapist is causing all these problems for them by not showing up and having to tell every single one of their patients. And then the therapist coming back and saying, no, they knew I was out of town, and it making me feel uncomfortable because I'm getting two different stories from them and being put in the middle. And meanwhile, I'm not important. So it's reinforcing that feeling of not being there and not existing and just being only a vehicle or a piece of meat in the middle of these two warring parties. And I've also had issues with their scheduling me at the same time as an addiction group. And so every time I would come in for an appointment, there would be this rowdy group of people, not only in the waiting room, but outside smoking to get through, and have to sign, papers and say my full name and my personal information in front of all of them every time I would come in, and then have nowhere to sit because they're using up all the seats. And not wanting to come in early to get a seat, because then that's just that much longer I have to be around these people. So yeah, that was an issue for me, because when I tried talking to my therapist about it, it was like my fault that I was feeling this way, and I needed to work on my issues about addicts, which I have worked on since then. But at the same time, it was that same issue of mine that wasn't getting addressed, of, oh, there's just not enough space for me, I shouldn't exist, and I'm not important. And so they think that it's just a simple cancellation and problems with administration. And for the patient, it's a completely different experience. And I've also had, I had peer support for a year, weekly, that was vital to me and was really making headway and was specialized in understanding PTSD, and so was working with me on dissociative symptoms specifically. And here I finally was having someone dealing with the stuff that therapists weren't dealing with. That was this was a peer support group. So that person left without any notice after meeting with me weekly for a year, and it completely blindsided me because I had for years not sought peer support. And then when I did, I was really reluctant about it, and it took months to feel comfortable with this person. But I knew from the very beginning that she was special and that she was listening to me. And so I finally started trusting her, and I thought we really had a bond, and she became really important to me. And she was someone that would listen for so long and then say a few words that were precisely putting her finger on the issue and unraveling everything. Very insightful, very long-lived, wise person. And all of a sudden she was gone, and the peer support group administration all changed. And I tried to stick with them, but I didn't have this at all. I tried really hard, but I just didn't connect with the people that replaced her. They were young, and it's complicated, but they were on the opposite side of the PTSD issue, so they were working with offenders. So this was like their first time working on the other side of it. So that was difficult for me. So I stopped going there, but I didn't stop going there right away. And I tried to do a job assessment, and I had a complete meltdown. And I didn't know why. And my therapist was changing at the same time. So I lost my old therapist and my peer support person at the same time. I was trying to do this job assessment, and I had a total meltdown and couldn't do it. And I didn't understand why. And I was trying to talk to my new therapist about it and saying how important the peer support had been to me and how I was feeling like I couldn't get to my tools. Like physically, I kept saying that I felt cognitively something was wrong, that a different part of my brain was at work and not conscious of the fact that I had done a year's worth of work and had papers that I could access and a binder and projects that I had done, creative projects I had done that had helped me make progress, that cognitively I didn't have access to that awareness. So I kept trying to explain this to my new therapist, and she just had no clue, and she was trying, and I was trying because she was a new therapist and I didn't want to mess things up. And so I worked with her, and about 2 months into working with her, once I had, my meltdown had kind of passed after about a month, and then we were talking about other stuff, and then she came around, to what had been like 2 months. Finally, a light bulb went on in one of our meetings, and she said, that peer support woman was really important to you, and there was a real connection there. And I was grateful to finally have that discussion with my new therapist. But at the same time, I said, why do you think it is that it's taken so long for us to get to this point? And why couldn't we have this discussion when I was in crisis? And I wasn't trying to attack her at all. I just really wanted to genuinely know. And this is when in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this is something that's gone on for years with my therapist, where there's just this delay between what I'm explaining and what they're finally getting. And, so she shook her head and she said, I don't know, I guess it's just part of the process, And then she left. So I felt like I had wronged her by bringing that up and by trying to be honest with her. And she was the first therapist that I've ever really been honest with, because I didn't have a choice. And I felt with the meltdown I was having that I was just going to lay it all out there and say I was really pissed that I lost my peer support and my therapist at the same time, and that I wasn't going to sugarcoat things with her. I told her, and that I'm just going to be really honest. And so to lose her after a few months, I thought, oh, well, I guess that kind of blew up in my face. And now I have a third therapist, and he only wants to focus on the PTSD. And when I had the experience with the dog that I did the video about, I wasn't seeing my therapist for 3 weeks because of the 4th of July holiday. So I finally got to see him last week, and I was telling him, blurting all this stuff out. And his response was, so did you use any of your coping skills? And I thought that he was critiquing me, that he didn't phrase the question as, were you able to, with empathy. And so I felt that there was that reinforcement again of therapists not understanding that cognitively there's something going on where I don't have access to coping skills and proper thinking mechanisms to interfere. And that I felt he was getting frustrated with me because he's been working with me for a couple months now. And I could just think in my mind, I could hear him in his mind thinking, is anything I'm saying getting through to her? And is she, making any progress? And so I think these relationships with therapists are really complicated and hard to maintain over time for so many reasons, if not the patient's resistance to therapy and leaving, which I've done in the past, but now to turnover of staff and their supposedly non-personal problems that they have to deal with. So anyway, that's my story, and I could go on, but I didn't intend to talk for this long, so thanks for listening.